Authorizer. Your identity as a researcher has already provoked the Federation of the surface world. Not conducive to our actions. This is the latest version 4.3 story of Tower of Fantasy. After the protagonist receives the disguised plotty communication, was kicked out of the Jest Host Sector virtual world. This has also become the biggest puzzle of this version. Who is the person pretending to communicate? Let's listen to Paolo's analysis. The authorizer was trapped. Knowing the truth, some people want to expose themselves in front of the firewall. Lose the qualification to enter the Jest Host Sector. There are two key pieces of information in this sentence. The first one is to expose the protagonist to the firewall. The second is to make the protagonist lose the qualification to enter the Jest Host Sector. These are the core objectives of the attacks by those behind the scenes. Possible targets for those behind the scenes. TT gave 4 answers. Nemesis, son of the heirs of Ida. Other factions of Hypros. With new enemies. Now let's analyze their possibilities one by one. However, before that, we still need to consider an answer that hasn't been mentioned. That's the Federal Defense Forces in the grid. In the previous version, we know that the federal government is also monitoring the lower world, and an organization with Antoria as its chief. But this analysis result is obtained from the perspective of God. The protagonist and plotty don't know. Since the Federation can control the protagonist's activities at the bottom level, so could the mastermind behind the disguised information be the Federation? This attack is just a test of the protagonist. To unravel this mystery, we have to look for flaws in the disguised information. The disguised conversation is very short. There are only 3 sentences. Authorizer. Your identity as a researcher has already provoked the Federation of the surface world. Not conducive to our actions, plotty? The situation is urgent. Now open the space rift and leave. I will help you change your identity now. Now. The first sentence. Authorizer, your status as a researcher has been caught up with the Federation of the surface world. Not conducive to our actions. Second sentence. It's urgent. Now open the space rift and leave. I will help you change your identity. The third sentence. Now, don't underestimate these 3 sentences. It already contains a lot of information. The first sentence begins by calling out our identities. Authorizer. This is the identity we have obtained in the real world. It is also a certificate that can enter and exit the grid world. There are 3 places where this title appears. The first is the dialogue with Plotty in reality. The second one is Mia's conversation with us. The third is the dialogue between the bottom world and Shirley. Given the federal surveillance of the lower levels, it is possible to eavesdrop on the address of the authorizer. Next is the identity of the researcher. The reason why the protagonist can act on the Jest Host Sector without being discovered by the firewall. It's because we disguised ourselves as Hypros researchers from the 4th District. He was originally a character in the Jest Host Sector. So that's why we can keep it a secret. But when entering the lower world, we also enter the body. So the identity of the researcher may also be subject to federal surveillance. It still cannot be seen as a loophole. Then it provoked the Federation of the surface world. There are 2 clues to this sentence. The first one is the surface world. It shows that people behind the scenes know that the Jest Host Sector is divided into 2 worlds, the bottom and the surface. The second one is to provoke the federal government. It happened that we were in front of Grey Fox's brother Acerata. He is also the leader of the Federal X team. He wants to bring up our matter regarding the federal archives for review. It's what the people behind the scenes said about causing trouble. This indicates that he can monitor our actions in real time. Who we met and what we did. He knows everything. These are also things that the federal government can do. The following is the last piece of information in the first sentence. Not conducive to our actions. What is our action? Find the reason for the downtime of Jest Host. Find Shirley. Human motives are the most elusive. The protagonist's action goals all come from the real world. I don't think the Federation of Jest Host Sector can analyze the real intention of the protagonist. But considering the ambiguity of this sentence, it's very likely that the Federation thought our action was to go to the lower world. It is also possible that the protagonist misunderstood the meaning. This is a typical cross-channel chat. The first sentence, although flawed, cannot be used as an absolute basis. Next, let's take a look at the second sentence. It's urgent. Now open the space rift and leave. I will help you change your identity. This sentence is full of flaws. The first flaw is the space rift. When entering the Jest Host Sector for the first time, Plotty told us not to use the space rift frequently. We'll be targeted by the firewall. So in the Jest Host Sector world, at the beginning, the protagonist always follows the local customs when in Rome, using DD Taxi. The only time in the story to open the space rift. In the theft case of Aurora Industries, the protagonist helps the Wednesday gang escape. I don't think this is the only time the gateway is opened that the Federation will be aware of it. Because the time is too short. Why did the protagonist get noticed by the Federation? It's because it appears in the lower world. After we enter the Jest Host Sector, the first time to enter the bottom world is on the 27th floor of Aurora Industries. Then use the space rift to escape. The interval between them is very short. It's impossible. We just entered surveillance. The Federation has got the evidence that we opened the space rift. If that's the case, so the efficiency of the Federation is too incredible. Next is the second loophole. Change your identity. If the space rift can still be evaded by the efficiency against the sky. So changing identities is simply impossible. Controlled by the Federation of the Jest Host Sector world. The protagonist has used 3 identities in the Jest Host Sector world. The first one is a researcher from the 4th District. The second one is the secretary of Aurora Industries. The third one is a newcomer from the dental gang. Changing the protagonist's identity is equivalent to soul transmigration. This kind of possessive ability is comparable to the primordial infancy of the cultivation world. Difficult to be accepted under a scientific worldview. Even if it is really acceptable. The protagonist did not reveal any flaws. The protagonist's disguise is actually not perfect. For example, in the main line, Meryl questioned this, what you and I know. Very different. Have you inquired about me? I just read your personnel files in high prose. Your past mentor evaluations have shown that your research ability is good. Silent and low-key personality. Because being obsessed with scientific research often neglects interpersonal communication. But the person I know, you are decisive, resolute, and calm in the face of danger. It can even be called brave and resourceful. When taking action, it is also decisive and decisive. At least never drag anyone down. But easily fooled. Extreme environments can indeed change a person. Even Meryl, as a partner, couldn't. From the protagonist's abnormality to the act of snatching a house. Just monitoring the protagonist's federation, so what? Can you know that the protagonist has the ability to change identities? And pay attention to the meaning inside the words. Claudie has the ability to change identities. So through this sentence, the possibility of federation is basically ruled out. The person who can know the information about changing identities must be someone who knows about the Just Host sector world. Who can know the information of opening space rift. People who know Just Host sector very well. Let's look at other answers after excluding the federal forces of the Just Host sector. The first one is Nemesis. Shirley and Void Piercer. First, Shirley. We met Shirley twice in the lower world. Shirley met twice hoping that we could help Void Piercer. That means she doesn't want us to leave the Just Host sector world. Take a step back and say, if Shirley did this to protect the protagonist, why bother so much? Wouldn't it be more convincing to use Shirley's own voice? Moreover, Void Piercer. Void Piercer is completely focused on eliminating the virus. Restore the control tower to protect the upper part of Just Hose. As long as the protagonist doesn't interfere with her. Void Piercer is too lazy to pay attention to the protagonist. Not to mention disguise Plotty's communication. The second answer is the heirs of Ida. When it comes to the heirs of Ida, mention the old the Sage. Now the new title is the Power of the Sage Coveting Authorizer. The heirs of Ida has been dormant for a long time. It's time to take action. But have you ever thought about it? Kick the protagonist off the internet. What can the Sage gain? Pretend to be the authorizer of the protagonist? Not to mention that authorizer is not someone who wants to be. Now, due to the protagonist's actions, causing the firewall to be upgraded. If the Sage really has this ability, she should have implemented the plan earlier. Now someone wants to enter the Just Hose sector. Even Plotty felt awkward. TT's latest plan is to shard and restart the firewall, intentionally attracting virus attacks. This way, the firewall will have no time to worry about the protagonist. This is also the origin of the restart defense in this version event. Even Plotty, who knows the Just Hose sector, has to take extraordinary measures. If the people behind the scenes are the Sage, wouldn't they be asking for trouble? Of course, it is not ruled out that the Sage have unknown methods. Then we can still judge from the disguised information. There is a lot of information inside. It can be explained by obtaining an internal ghost. But real-time monitoring of the protagonist's activities. The heirs of Ida can't do it. If it could be done. After Domain 9. Freya wouldn't say that heirs of Ida is helpless. Next up are third-party forces. Other factions of Hycros. Plotty and our faction. It is the future humanism supporting Omnium energy. Other factions just don't support Omnium energy's wise idiism. But the factions here and before the Cataclysm. It's different. Before the Cataclysm, the demands of the two factions are extreme. One party hopes to vigorously develop Omnium energy. One party hopes to give up Omnium energy completely. But after the Cataclysm, the two factions have reached a consensus. Keep the existing development of Omnium energy unchanged. No more building new Tower of Fantasy. Now there's something wrong with Just Hose. Not only the new Tower of Fantasy of Domain 9 is affected. Old Towers of Fantasy in other time and space are also affected. The shutdown of Just Hose affects the common interests of two factions. So repairing Just Hose is good for both camps. Kick the protagonist off the internet. Other factions of Hycros are also victims. Next is the final answer. New enemy. This is also the result that Xiaofeng is least willing to analyze. New enemies mean unknown. It means we know nothing about him. But he has all of our information. Not only knowing the authorizer and changing identities, he can also monitor our every move in real time. We are in the light, the enemy is in the dark. This passivity will make the Just Hose sector trip full of variables. Do new enemies really exist? Xiaofeng reorganized the grid version of the data. I really discovered a power. Grid version has been running since then. Have you all thought about a question? Who created the Just Hose sector? Even if Just Hose has the ability to calculate the world. But who exactly led the creation? Simply put, it means, who arranged the Just Hose sector bureau behind? From Asperia in the Cataclysm to the return of Void Piercer. Everything should have a mastermind behind it. Previously, we counted the action of Void Piercer on the Sage. Because she was an angle of clemency. But after entering the Just Hose sector, the Sage is also in dire straits. Obviously, the Sage cannot control Void Piercer, but rather a cooperative relationship. So who is the person behind all of this? Xiaofeng was included in the initial configuration data of the version. Found the answer. Lucius, the early authorizer. Many people may have heard this name for the first time. But this name has already appeared. In the introduction of future humanism, Lucius is the former rotation authorizer of Hypros. Pay attention to Hypros mentioned here. It's Hypros of Omnium Energy Research Bureau. At that time, Hypros was still a federal affiliated scientific research institution. We all know the predecessor of Just Hose. It's the artificial intelligence SAM of the distant beacon spacecraft. It was transformed into Omnium Energy Super Quantum Computer. Before this, controlling it does not require a special group of people. But after the renovation, the only person who can control Just Hose is the rotation authorizer. So Lucius is not the former authorizer. He is more like the first generation of authorizer, and the first person who could control Just Hose. At the same time, he is also the most suitable candidate to be the person behind the scenes. First, he knows Just Hose very well. Second, he has the strength to enter the Just Hose sector world. Third, he is extremely persistent to Omnium Energy. After the cataclysm, not content with the status quo, and will try to find out the reason for Aberrant. So retrospective analysis has become a great way. Coincidentally, Just Hose has this ability. Xiaofeng's speculation is not unfounded, but it is analyzed from the perspective of vested interests. Kick the protagonist off the internet. Who benefits the most? The real beneficiary is the Just Hose sector. How is that possible? The protagonist has now changed history. Saved Wednesday. Isn't this a good thing? It is indeed a good thing for individuals, but not for the whole world of Just Hose sector. Because the protagonist was originally an outsider. The protagonist's intervention is like the invasion of a virus. No one would allow their territory to be invaded by others. The previous protagonist only disguised herself as a researcher. She didn't do anything out of the ordinary. But in the new version, the protagonist has attempted to change history. This is something that those behind the scenes cannot tolerate. So he kicked the protagonist out of the game. From this perspective, the purpose of Just Hose sector world creation is to recover. It's for observation. The Just Hose sector must have been calculated countless times in the past. There was no change until the return of Void Piercer. Void Piercer are also variables. Why hasn't it caused the backlash of those behind the scenes like the protagonist? From Plotty's mouth, we know that the energy of Void Piercer is homologous with that of Alteration Virus. So we can come up with a bold guess. It was Lucius who created the Grid World and Void Piercer. But Void Piercer was lost to the outside world by accident. Obtained by the Sage. In order to gain the power of Authorizer, the Sage, always trying to activate the Fissure. The way is the experiment of Angle of Clemency. Until Shirley appeared. Perfect physique and Void Piercer integration. Later, the Sage and Void Piercer reached cooperation. Or the Sage thinks she controls Void Piercer. Until the loss of Domain 9 Void Piercer. She finally returned to the grid. Lucius experiments for many years. Finally returned to the right track. But at this moment, the protagonist and Hypros begin to intervene. On the one hand, Lucius hates our involvement. On the one hand, he also needs to do a good job disguising himself, not letting anyone discover his existence. That's why we forged information. Expose us to the firewall. Being treated as a virus and cleared out. And being able to do all of this. It also illustrates a problem. Lucius probably doesn't exist in the real world, but dormant in the world of Just Hose sector. Only in this way, he can control the protagonist's actions in real time. Only in this way, he cannot be found by Hypros. Only in this way, his communication will only intervene from the surface world. Only in this way, he can master the information outside the Just Hose sector. Because these things are all leftovers from his playtime. If this guess comes true, the enemy that the protagonist will face next is too powerful. He is the creator of the Grid World. Is the first generation of Authorizer. From the perspective of Just Hose sector world, it's not an exaggeration to be called the creator god. But we are not without advantages either. Restarting the firewall is a downgrade attack. He called himself invincible on the Just Hose sector. I have foreign players who say they are unbeatable. If compared to superviruses in computers versus constantly upgrading antivirus software. Since he knows that he can change his identity in the Just Hose sector, then his identity in the Just Hose sector world may not be unique. Even more flexible than us. This kind of experience where changing one's identity can change one's life. I suspect he no longer wants to return to reality. Now, the best hope is that Void Piercer will deal with the Alteration Virus. Prevent the cataclysm. In this way, the Just Hose sector becomes his own backyard. Isn't this another kind of eternal life? Although the content of this issue may seem a bit surreal, but it is also the ultimate that can be deduced from existing content. And Plotty raised the possibility of a new enemy. The explanatory text has also been considered in this direction. This is the subconscious leakage of information. The reason why all interpretations and analyses can accurately hit the answer. It's not that the interpreter is very skilled, but it's because of the creator's persistence in the setting. The more we implement the setting, the more truth will be revealed. The story of Tower of Fantasy may not satisfy everyone, but the creators behind it must have been carefully crafted. Alright, that's all for this issue. Follow Xiaofeng to experience a different Tower of Fantasy.